Africans at home and throughout the diaspora. Unity is strength. We've got the power.
Stop the fussing and the fighting. Now the time to do the right thing.
We need more UNITY. Come.
Stop the fussing and the fighting. Yeah. Now the time to do the right thing.
In the spirit of Umoja, embrace with love.
Let's do it right now. We've got to do it right. Stop the fussing and the fighting.
Right now.
Now the time to do the right thing. Let's do it right now. We've got to do it right.
Right now. Right now.
Let's do it right now. We don't need to fuss and fight.
We've got to have peace in Africa, yeah.
Let's do it right now. We don't need to fuss and fight.
The war must cease.
Listen up.
Yes, yes. This is Jamala Rogers, your host of Voices from the Battlefield, and we got to do it right, y'all. We do not have margin for errors. We got to do it right, and we got to do it together. I'm here at the Black Radio Hall of Fame, live at the Harris Stowe State University, St. Louis's own historically Black college. This show, Voices from the Battlefield, brings together voices from across the country who are involved in all kinds of organizing on many different fronts. That's why we say Voices from the Battlefield. And we are fighting against racism, against patriarchy, against homophobia, but we are fighting for democracy, economic justice, political power, and dignity. And so when we talk about bringing these issues together, it's also to give people a view that folks are not struggling alone. There are people in other places that are doing the same work. Some people are doing it differently, but it's still the same work on the battlefront. So we have some special guests today, and I know my listeners would say, Jamala, you always say they're special. Well, they are. That's because it's not based on who they are, it's what they're doing for our community. That's what makes them special. And our very special guests today are Amanda Tello, April Warren Grice, and Adande, and they are all from my bestest organization in the world, InPower Institute. And the founder was not able to be with us today, Rebecca Bennett, but we're gonna get her on sometime. She's not off the hook. Yeah, we're gonna get her in here. And so they're all a part of a healing collective, and we're gonna talk about that in a little bit. But before we do, I just want to remind people that St. Louis had its own traumatic event on October 24th when 3 people lost their lives as a result of the shooting at Central Visual and Performing Arts. So we lost Alexandria Bell, who was only 15 years old. We lost a teacher there, Jean Kuska, and we also, and this is sometimes it's controversial, we also lost Orlando Harris. He was the shooter. He was 19 years old. He was a former student, but he left behind a message for us that talked about the trauma that he was feeling, isolated and alone. And so I want to bring that into the conversation as well. So welcome, guest, to Voices from the Battlefield.
Thank you so much for having us. We're excited to be here.
So I really want to first talk about the Institute itself, and then what it means, and then the healing piece of it. And, you know, throughout the conversation, I want us to talk about trauma, what it means, what it looks like, to talk about the myths, because one of the myths I think is out there is that there's not a real thing about healers, that you know, all you're talking about is getting in a circle and, you know, humming some chants, and that connects us, and now all the trauma is going to just disappear into the ethos. The other myth is that you all are trying to take the place of psychologists and psychiatrists. So I want touch on that. And then I also want to talk about how people access your services. So whoever wants to jump in, what is the Institute about? And then we'll break that into what's the healing component about and what you do.
Okay, I'll jump in. So InPower Institute was founded by Rebecca Bennett in 2010, and we are a collective of healers, but also of organizers, of educators, of mental health practitioners, ministers, coaches, artists. We believe in the combined efforts of all of these in order to center community health and wellness for collective vitality. So the notion that healing separates is not our scope. We believe that it takes the entire community and different modalities of healing to come together to provide for all of the healing needs of the whole community, of a whole person, and the wholeness of all. We have our core team that does, the background stuff, the stuff that people don't see, but then also our Black Healers Collective, our Spirit Rising is our spiritual kind of center, and we offer healing support for individuals. We offer healing support for organizations. We also offer more community-centered programs where we literally will go into the community and host healing salons and workshops. Some of them are crisis response, and then some of them are simply to promote ongoing wellness and healing. So that is us as a collective. But I definitely wanted to hop on that notion that we are trying to take the place. Community healing takes everyone. It takes practitioners, it takes licensed people, it takes doctors, it takes educators, it takes all of those energies because it's all coming from different vantage points in order to pour back into the community. We often say that trauma happens or hurt happens within the community. And so, because of that, we must also heal as a community.
So while you're talking, Adande, I want you to talk a little bit about, because your title is spiritual impact. So can you talk about what that means? Because that in itself just sounds like, oh my goodness, this person's got a lot of weight on her to do some real healing.
So, absolutely. My position within Empower is well, part of the core team, but also with our spirit community. So our Spirit Rising community, spiritual impact advocate really just means that I am centering the spiritual wellness at the core of what I do. So anytime I am participating in conjunction with Black Healers Collective, but also within Spirit Rising and within my own individual work, it is tapping into the individual spirit connective. How do we connect to the divine internal and the divine external in order to tap more into how we relate to each other and how we grow and heal the community externally.
Okay, and so I'm going to ask Amanda the same question, because you have a particular title too that's very interesting. You are the cultural decolonist. And I think when people think about colonization, they certainly don't think about anybody in this country. But the fact of the matter is, we have colonial minds based on that we were colonized and stolen. But so talk a little bit about what your role is in the collective.
Yeah, so I do a lot of work around just decolonization. I'm a Native person, and so just by that alone, I have had generations and generations of people that have been colonized, and it's just our general response to how we heal, how we interact with one another. All of that is compounded by the traumas of colonization. And we also embody some of that. So when we get to these spaces where we're wanting to heal, there's some hesitation to it because it feels like it's like, the term is like, oh, it's a white person thing. Actually, these healing modalities, these circles, these things that we did, but they were taken, stolen, and then used in capitalistic systems for, earnings of money. But so it's a reclaiming of just what was ours, what we know to be true, and also a reconnection to ourselves, because a lot of it is when we take the time and space to sit with ourselves in that silence and to reconnect with our own bodies, we start to remember these medicines that we've forgotten because of colonization. It's a lot of that, and then it's also the fact that I am a parent of a lot of children, and it's that decolonizing the way in which I interact with them, and I do a lot of offerings on what that means to me.
That to me is fairly profound, and the fact that you are native makes me think about, in a couple of days there's going to be this thing called Thanksgiving, which has its own baggage, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I want to go to April, because I think when we talk about mental health, and Amanda raised this, like, that's white people's thing, like, we strong, we resilient, that's why we here. No, we're here because we survived, but are we thriving, and are we whole people as we participate in this full society? So talk a little bit about that.
I think you raised a great point. We're here, we're surviving, but are we thriving? And I think that is really, that's the crux of the matter, where we've just been surviving for a very long time. And so what InPower Institute is all about, including us as individuals and us as a collective, and as the Black Healers Collective, we are trying to help everyone to thrive. And just going off what Amanda said, that actually starts with remembering who we are. And the fact that she said that, we started this. Facts. Like, as so right now I'm currently taking this course on the Meta Nature, learning how to write the hieroglyphs. And as I'm learning about Egyptian culture, ancient Egyptian culture, like, there was no separation between spirituality, culture, education, all the things. It was all intertwined. Healing, all of those things were intertwined. And so unless we reclaim that, and once we get still with ourselves and to remember, we can't even get to moving beyond surviving, because we're so busy trying to put out these little fires. But what happens if we actually take the time to invest in ourselves? And for those who might be familiar with tithing, if we tithe to ourselves first, give ourselves the first fruits, then that will actually enable and support us to do all of the things that we want to do and that we need to do. So even if we think about yoga, so I always say that in yoga, the last pose, which is where you're laying down, Shavasana, or some folks call it the corpse pose, when you are in that pose, I call it the MVP pose. The reason I call it that is because rest supports everything that we do. If we don't rest, we can't do all the things that we want to do, nor that we have to do. And so what we really try to do is just to help people just to remember, in giving them, in remembering in different modalities. So I might lead yoga courses. Adande is coming in with some courses on some spirituality through our spirit salon. Amanda's coming in teaching parents and talking to parents, and even talking about herbalism and all the things that I don't know, but I want to know more of. Because the more that we remember, the more, like, that is the solution. Not only is that the root, ROOT, but it is the root to liberation. It is the root to surviving and thriving. So I don't really know if that answered your question, but I think surviving is just like, that's the base model, and that's cool. But we have to move beyond that, and that's what we're trying to do. And we try to do that actually through like spiritual growth and discovery, holistic health and healing, abundant living, harmonious relationships, cultural arts and expression, and then community and justice. So those are kind of our 6 buckets that we try to place these programs and offerings that we have for the people. But then also, we really also try to heal ourselves first. So while we may be facilitating some of these workshops, we believe that it's when we pour into ourselves, tithe first to ourselves, and then give to others. Like, the medicine for us is also the medicine for the community. And I think that's the beauty of it. And even, again, going back to my Meta Nature, because I'm really hype on that right now, but going back to the Meta Nature and that culture, it's when we give to others, it's not only beneficial for them, but it's also beneficial for us. And that is like a fundamental principle of ancient Kemetic wisdom. So we have to remember that wisdom, because it never was lost. We've always been doing it, and sometimes we've been seduced to forgetting it. So
yeah. No, that answers the question. And in fact, I was going to ask you, when you talked about what we need for ourselves and taking care of ourselves. And I was thinking the whole concept of abundant living, that, and you answered that too, so I don't even have to deal with that. But this whole thing about putting out fires both internally and externally, that's a lot. That's a lot for people of color who've been colonized in many different ways to try to do that. And one of the things I often talk about when I'm doing organizing trainings is the concept they give us on the plane. You got to first put that oxygen tank on yourself. You may not survive to help somebody else if you don't do that first. And so I think the whole point, and Amanda, you talked about this even as a mother, like if we're not passing on this stuff about how to thrive in a world that's hostile to us, that is stripping us every chance it gets, that it is designed, the capitalist system is designed to dehumanize, to denigrate. And so if you don't have that, what I call the armor of resistance, then that stuff gets through your armor. I mean, it's a porous armor. And so, it only becomes impenetrable once you understand all of the stuff that you all are talking about. But when you talked about putting out the fires, I'm like, yeah, that's what we do. And that just takes all our energy and time. But I do want to ask Amanda about this whole thing about spiritually centered. And you can jump into here too, Adande, because then people associate that with organized religion, that somehow you're going to be forced to take on some Christianity stuff and pray to a god, a white god, or whatever people think is some of the resistance they have to spirituality when you say that. So can you, either one of you all, define what you mean when you say spirituality and how we tap into that as part of the healing process?
Yeah, I feel like both of us can definitely do a good job with this. For me personally, so my background is we are mission Indians. So my family was enslaved on missions, on Catholic missions in California, in the Bay Area, and the majority of the tribe was actually killed in those missions. So for me, religion is a difficult subject. And I actually know Adande first because, ironically, we went to theology seminary school together. And I went to seminary because I was like, okay, I have this complex relationship with religion. It's hard for me to identify these teachings, these learnings that I've grown up with, that I have been molded to understand, like my relationship with the elements, my relationship with Creator. And I have a lot of family that still follows Catholicism, that have been baptized into the church. My great grandmother was baptized on one of those missions. So, it's complex. But what I found is mostly that, one, I have found a different relationship with not necessarily religion itself, but with figures of religion like Jesus. Every year I have people ask me, like, how do you feel about Easter? I'm like, oh, I get down with Jesus. Jesus is flipping tables. Jesus is about, being with the oppressed. Jesus is about, like, no, this is not okay. This is absolutely not okay. Like, we're going to disrupt. We're going to, flip everything over. And so, like, I'm down with that. It's definitely not that I follow a typical religion personally. I am a very spiritual person, but I have learned just through my relationship with people at InPower, through my relationship in seminary, to find a middle ground in what I call is, religion can be harmful, spirituality can be harmful, but what does it mean at the root, and how can it hold and support me, and how can I know my true self, and then how can I connect to something like the ancestors, the Creator, that can help me through my continued journey on this side of the earth.
And Adanda, before you jump in, I just think this is interesting because I know Bertini Gray, and she also went to seminary school, and I'm thinking, what is the connection? And then the transformation, how the breakthrough came. That to me is really revealing. But go ahead, Adanda. I just had to throw that in there.
No, absolutely, and it's a beautiful connection. I think that it is important to note that as a collective, we are a liberatory interfaith collective. And that encompasses the multi levels of healing work that we do. Again, you have Black Healers Collective that is concerned specifically with the healing of community and going into the community. And so the modalities might be different. Spirit Rising is definitely concerned with partnering on our soul's journey of healing, but understanding that this is a collective venture. I love going back to the airplane model because everyone, if everyone tends, if everyone puts on their mask, then you're not alone. So while the individual act is you placing the oxygen over your faith, you are doing it in community. We are doing community healing. And so that is part of the work that we are focused on, this know thyself, this tend to thyself. But we don't focus on any particular modality or any particular book of faith. We encompass all of it. We believe that there is truth and power in all of it. Anything that is good is in effect good. Anything that leads us towards our liberation is good for the soul. Like that literally cannot be denied. So this joining of different forces allows us to connect to all spirits, to all soul. You're gonna find some biblical, you're gonna find some Quran, you're gonna find some Baha'u'llah, you're gonna find some Buddhism, you're gonna find some Hinduism, a little bit of all of it, because again, we believe that truth in and of itself is liberatory. And that comes out in all of the healing work. We're not going to ask anyone to pray to something that does not resonate with them, but we are going to say or ask everyone if they believe in themselves. Is there something deeper in you to connect to? And if that deeper sense of self you connect to, if you want to call it creation or source or universe or mother nature or big mama, papa, daddy, whatever it is that you need to, how you need to do that. Little self, big self, how we create this continuum of spirit, of self. We are concerned with the spirit and the healthy spirit, the vitality of spirits in all that we do.
And
So
if
I
I could,
think
if I
no,
could
go ahead, because I'm just sitting with that and how powerful that is. Because if I just feel like if that was a piece that we could transcend and really go forward in a very decisive way, that we would start to strip away some of these colonial attitudes and behaviors about who we are and who other people are. Go ahead, April.
I'm just going to add to that. So one of the things that we always ask people in our work, whether it's like just as a first question, like we really just try to ask, how is your spirit? How is your soul? Like really getting people to move beyond like, how you doing? Oh, I'm good, I'm fine. Like surface stuff, like, and actually asking and really wanting a response to know how people are doing, how their spirit and souls are doing. Because so I generally, work with educators. That's my field. And so when I work with educators and I bring them together in what's called like a Mozella's kitchen, named after my grandmother. And if you think about a kitchen, good stuff always happened in the kitchen around that table, right? But whenever I bring these educators together, no matter what, and generally I bring them to talk about wellness or talk about how they're doing, really asking how their soul is, without fail, someone in the group ends up crying because of the oppressive nature of the job. And what that community of educators do is then provide support for that educator and pour into that educator, then provide some solutions and recommendations. And hey, here's my phone number. So spirituality moves beyond the tradition of religion and four walls or whatever the walls that one might think about, but it really moves to just getting to that core. How is your spirit? How is your soul? And helping them to work through whatever they're going through and to keeping it light so that we can move to that place of thriving.
I'm gonna just do a little pushback for you, April. So that is a question that we often say, how you doing? And people like, I'm cool. And I think because we really don't know what to do if they said something different. So if I said, April, I've lost 3 people in the last week, I can't take this shit no more. Well, if I might say that to April knows how to respond to that. But if I say that to just a regular person, they're not gonna know what to do with that. And now they're feeling guilty that all they could do is give me a big old hug. I need more than that. And so how do we respond to each other uh, in a way that's healthy, even if we don't always have the tools? Um, because I have been in many situations just like you described. When you say that and there's a breakthrough, somebody is going to have an emotional breakdown. And then what do you do with that? So can you just talk a little bit about that? If you don't have the training and the credentials, how do you deal with situations where you know people are in pain, they're expressing it, they're crying, they almost immobilized by it? What can the average person do?
Oh, that's a beautiful question. That's a beautiful question. And I'm gonna explain it how I learned it best. And I think experience is the best teacher. My mom had frontal temporal dementia. Okay, look, I'm an educator. I got a PhD in education. I can tell you, I can teach you some, but any of that other stuff beyond, no, ma'am, that's not me. I'm gonna stay in my wheelhouse. And while caring for her, not knowing what was best, and then not always even getting support from people, and then when my mom lost the ability to speak, what I learned is your presence is enough. The fact that I was sitting there with my mom and I was moving and grooving and we was dancing through that thing called dementia together, my presence was enough. If people would have just came and just sat with my mom or sat with me for that matter as a caretaker, that would have been enough. But then I'll move beyond presence, because presence, it really is enough just to, because sometimes you just need somebody to be there and just to hear. The second point I would say is listening, and I mean active listening, and not listening necessarily to solve their issues, but sometimes people just need to get it off because they keep it bottled up, and we already know what that does to people when you keep all that stuff inside. As I've explained to my nephew, I'm like, look, it's kind of, if you keep it all inside, it's kind of like you're constipated, and that can literally take you to the hospital. You've got to get it out, right? So sometimes we just need people to listen. So then, but the third piece, and this is one that I got from my a former pastor when I used to go to church at First Baptist, Pastor, I forgot his name at the moment. I see his face, but he asked me a profound and powerful question, and I use it now all the time. He said, April, how can I support you? And I was like, ain't nobody ever asked me that question. Like, so I didn't even necessarily know how to ask, or excuse me, how to answer that question. But once I actually sat with myself and thought about it, then I could provide an answer for them. But in that moment, I couldn't. But what that does is it gets people to think about what they actually need. And when you ask, you're not assuming anything that they need, but you're actually being like more appropriate, more receptive to actually helping them in a way that they could be helped. So I would think
That
those three.
yeah, I'm thinking about I've asked people that question, like, how can I help you? How can I support you? And it's like a blank look. And that's okay for them, but just to know that I've asked the question and they can always come back, I think is important. The other piece is the listening piece, because I actually teach that in my organizing workshops, because we have a Western view, and Amanda's nodding her head, of listening. We're not listening. We're trying to determine how our response is going to be. And so the profound listening, and I always say you're listening with all of your sensibilities, not just with your ears, so that you can pick up, body language, you can pick up the tone of how people are responding. All that tells you a lot if you're an active listener. So I'm going to just ask Amanda, because culturally, I think when you have circles, that's about listening. People have to listen. And how important is that in understanding people's own reality, but helping them to understand other people's?
Yeah, I mean, I think just on this topic, like listening is a couple of things, because it's also us learning to sit in our own discomfort of other people's discomfort. And that's something, like, especially as people who are either, female presenting or who identify as being female, like, we're very quick to want to solve all of those issues. And so for us to kind of like have to take a step back and be in that discomfort is actually where we grow. Like, that's where we're going to grow. That's where we're going to be able to expand. And the other part of it is listening allows us to come to the point of us understanding what our needs are, because a lot of it is, when we've come from backgrounds of unmet needs, when somebody asks us, we don't have any idea. We don't know what to say. We're not sure what it is that we need, or we can't articulate it. Our body responds, our emotions respond in a certain way, but we don't really know how to articulate that. And listening time, I do that as a parent. I actually have 3 listening times a week. And it allows me to not only express what I'm feeling in a safe place where somebody can just hold that. All they're doing is just holding what I'm saying. But it really allows me to like kind of listen back to what I said and be like, wow, like this, and identify what it is that I need in that situation. And so then later, if somebody does ask me, what do I need? I'm like, oh, I know. I need space. I need somebody to come over and take care of my children because they're being wild and crazy. I need to sleep. I need to eat some food on my own without an interruption. There's 3 things I figured out just from listening to myself talk about my terrible day and the terrible experiences that I had. So yeah, that's just, I think
So
that
yeah.
was great.
No, I think about that, the listening part, but then some people do the journaling, which is a different kind, but you're getting out what you need and how you feeling. So yeah, I totally get that. So can you talk, all of y'all can talk about this one. What is trauma and how does it manifest itself in our lives, in our communities? Because I think sometimes, in fact, I included some symptoms in my book, Ferguson is America, because, and I'm a former educator too, so I took what I thought were some of the basic things of trauma, like, and they were all have to do with behavior. And so the conclusion was, this is a bad kid that needs to go to the office. But they were actually symptoms of trauma that often get missed. And so like, you just acting out. Well, hell yeah, you're acting out because this is a situation where that's the way the body and mind and spirit is responding. So talk a little bit about trauma, what it is, how it gets triggered, and how it manifests itself in our lives.
Well, so I see trauma just like in my own personal life is the disruption between what I need and those needs being met. And a lot of that times it is, for me personally, that trauma experience was, around addiction, incarceration, foster care. Like these were all things that disrupted how I got my needs met, and how I could build a safe environment and really get to know myself and build those attachments and connections that I needed. The way that I see them in my own life, I definitely, and it's funny because we actually read your book in one of our classes in seminary. So I just want to point that out. But I see all of these behavioral things. What I'm learning more and more is the way that it impacted and is held in my body, which is something that I didn't totally understand. I could understand that, like I was crying in response, I was angry in response, but there is things that I'm learning just about my own stillness. My like, like when you are like tight, like your body gets tight, symptoms that I'm having in my body as response, like actual medical symptoms, inflammation in my body, just all of these other things that I didn't understand was an impact because of trauma. So whatever anyone else has to say about all that too.
Yeah, Adande, what do you think? Because when I'm looking at you all's age and generation group, and I'm making some assumptions here, although April did disclose her age, there are a number of young organizers that I come across who have all kinds of issues, anxiety, and they're actually taking medication. So it's a clinical diagnosis. They have trouble sleeping. They have eat. I mean, it's a host of things. And so when I think about you all's description or definition of trauma, of unmet needs, we seem to be just a bundle of that. And I'm wondering, Dande, how do you pull out what you can actually handle when all of it's coming at you simultaneously?
That is an amazing question. Let me start with because I think all of our concepts of trauma are going to be like ombre. They're going to kind of feed into each other. The way that I tend to define trauma is like an interruption or a separation that impacts our perception of wholeness and brokenness. So it takes us from this sense of wholeness to this sense of brokenness. And so you're absolutely right. First off, let me say that organizing work, community organizing work, liberatory organizing work, spiritual organizing work is hard. It is difficult because you are not just holding space for others, but you are also attempting to maneuver to kind of create a way forward, a movement forward of a whole and collective, and that is heavy work. That coupled with our own interruptions, wherever it might be, it shows up, like Amanda was saying, in our body, but it also shows up in our actions. It shows up in our vantage point, in our perspective, how our vision is tinted so that we might see something, sometimes by way of our own or through the lens of our own trauma, as opposed to through a liberatory stance. How do we sit with that? We unpack it. You cannot heal what you cannot see or what you are unwilling to see. So part of the Black Healers Collective is to curate community spaces where we can do some of this work collectively. You're not alone. We all got stuff. We all got a backpack with crap in it. We all do. And so your crap might look a little different than my crap, but it's all crap. And we got to get it out. And the best way to do it is to dump it out, put it on the table, and sift through it. So that's the first step in identifying and in being able to move it forward. Some of it is recognizing that there is a separation between my mind and my spirit's intuition, and that I've got to bring those back into accordance or into alignment. And one of the ways to do it is to feel where feelings exist in my body. When I'm experiencing anxiety, when I'm experiencing a sense of depression, we've got to change our wording. Words are powerful. It's prayer. It's literal vibrations into the universe. And so instead of saying I have I have anxiety or I am depressed, no, I'm experiencing some feelings of depression. Well, where is that sitting? Where do you feel it? Is it in your arms? Is it in your chest? Is it in your back? What's hurt? What's hurting you? We can start there. What's aching on your body? Is it your knees? Can you
Mm,
stand up? Okay. Can you sit down? Okay. Can you
mhm.
sit? Can you go to sleep through the night? Let's talk about it. So we start in the spaces with what we can tangibly see, and then we work our way backwards. And eventually we'll get to the spirit, and eventually we'll get to things that connect. And I might say something that is ailing me, and April will be like, oh my God, girl, I had da 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 happen too. And when this was happening, this is how I dealt with it. And I may not mirror exactly, but I might get some like, oh, let me try some of that. Let me pick up a journal. Let me take a walk. Let me put my feet in the ground. Let me touch or hug a tree. Let me hold somebody's hand and stand in this circle. Let me just breathe with someone and sit with my own discomfort because I've never had somebody just see me to just see me before. So we create these spaces where we can do some of this tending because it's not easy. And again, as April said in the beginning, this is work that we do as practitioners. That means we are constantly practicing the healing work that we're also doing, and we're providing an opportunity for the community to join us in these practices.
April, you want to add to that? I don't
Just a
I
little
don't see
bit.
how you can, but do your best.
Just a little bit. I'm gonna go with their definitions. Anything that interrupts or disrupts our wholeness and seeing ourselves as whole and being whole. So what they said is great. And I just wanted to give a practical example. I just and it goes right with theirs because I just realized recently I was in a conversation with somebody that didn't turn out so good. And afterwards, I realized that I was freezing. There's freeze, flight,
Fight
fright,
and
right?
fight. Hmm.
Yeah, what you said, fight, flight, freeze. I realized that I freeze in those moments, but it wasn't until I actually took time to sit with myself, reflect on it, and realized, oh, I'm actually freezing. And so then just yesterday, I talked to my therapist. I was like, look, I realized that I'm freezing in this. And so I'm freezing in these moments. And he said that's actually a good sign, because otherwise, if you went the other way, then you might disassociate. And I was like, oh, okay, I don't like freezing. So how do I get rid of it? Because I want to respond properly and appropriately. And he said,
And timely.
And come on, and timely. And he said that first, your recognition of it is great. Second, he said that you need a plan to disrupt it when it happens again, because someone go, it's, it's life. If it can't happen, it will happen, and it surely will happen. So you need a plan. And so it was like changing the language, right? Like Adande just talked about, changing the language and then coming up with the plan. What am I going to do next? And I realized, okay, I said, I'm going to stand up for myself. That's what I'm going to do. And he said, might I add, lovingly? And I was like, oh, okay, that's good. Because he said you want to do it in a loving way for yourself and for the other person. Because I imagine it's not about a winning situation and who can win, but instead it's about a growth situation for everybody. And I was like, well, all right. Well, I'm growing now.
And your work is cut out for you.
Yes, ma'am.
So all of you all talked about the wholeness and disrupting the wholeness, but how, when we've been so broken, and I hate using the deficit model, but we are broken, and that doesn't mean that we can't be healed, but we've been this way for a while, and so it's normalized. Our behavior as decolonized people is normalized. So how do we know when we got into that wholeness part that you all are talking about? What would that look like? And how do people identify? I know that's a really hard one, y'all. How do you identify what pieces that you need to deal with to make yourself whole?
So I definitely think that I don't know that in this lifetime I will ever get to pure wholeness. I think that it's just a journey that I'm constantly on. I think it's, this whole, like all of these things that we were talking about, being able to identify the trauma, being able to actually see it, being able to, look at your parents and the ways in which they impacted your trauma, and have compassion for their journey while also having accountability for how that impacted your life. It's in this stage where April was talking about, like, these are my mechanisms, these are how I survive. And it's not saying these are terrible, it's saying, like, and these help me survive. Like, these, thank you for being able to have those moments where I freeze. Thank you for having those moments where I can disassociate. I think it's just not necessarily like the wholeness, but it is the wholeness, but it's being able to, what do they call that? Like being able to like blend all of these things together and hold space for like all of these truths at one time. I found personally that the way I started this journey was, none of this sits right. We all know that none of this sits right in our body. It doesn't sit right in our minds. We know that we're constantly striving for wholeness. We're striving for it. We want connection. We want freedom. We want liberty. We want it. We want it so much in our bodies that we cannot deny that we don't have it. But the thing that got me to being able to be like, okay, this is where I really need to focus, is I sat down and I actually said, like, what are my values? What is important to me in this moment, in this time? And I did it, several times throughout the seasons. It shifts, it changed. But it allowed me to say, like, hey, connection is important to me. Okay, connection is important to me. Well, let's talk a little bit more about what that means. Connection that is, I like people to be here. I like physical connection. I like emotional connection. Now, how am I showing up in my life in that way? And am I showing up in a way that allows me to really live into this value that I say that I have? And like, that's kind of where you start recognizing, like, ooh, this isn't in alignment. So now what can I do? How can I step back, and how can I live more in alignment with this thing? But I don't know. I think for me, the wholeness gets to the end of the life personally. Like when I have transcended, I think that's kind of like when I get to the wholeness. But in the meantime, I'm always working for it because I feel it little by little.
Wow.
I think some of the times a lot of people have um, glamorized healing and liberation as a
Yeah,
destination.
exactly.
And it is not. It is a continual journey. I like the example of a spiral staircase. So even as you go higher, you're going to circle back around and still be able to look on or upon something that you've seen before, but you're higher. So your vantage point, your perspective is different. You can deal with it a little differently. Amanda said, before, like, how am I pouring into myself once I recognize it? The tension that we feel can be, I don't want to say corrected, but can be acknowledged if we look at the desire. There is a desire when we're feeling tension. When you know that you know something, but your experience of it is different, there's tension there. And so to sit back and to acknowledge that, to recognize it, to plan, to make a plan, and then to practice that. But this is a constant journey. You don't just get well and stop being well. You still got to eat right. It's not like your doctor gives
Especially
you.
if we still under capitalism too. It's still
Come on
providing
now.
those.
Absolutely, absolutely. If your dentist says your mouth is good, no cavities, you've been brushing well, do you go home and stop brushing your teeth, eat a bunch of candy? No, you don't, because you have to continuously tend to the wellness. So what we are saying as we're talking about community illness is that we must continuously tend to the wellness. It's not a one-off. You don't just come to one spot. You don't go to one therapy session and be like, "Oh, hallelujah." You don't go to church one day, one Sunday, and come out and the world is just over. You don't stop praising because you did it yesterday. This is something that is continuous in our life. You don't only pray once, you don't tend to yourself once, you don't bathe once. So these are the things that it's a journey. And I think that the wholeness comes later. It is the realization when you get there. I feel like wholeness is what we look back upon, and maybe we only get a split second of that as we transition. I pray that we have those moments where we can look back and say, you know what, all was well, all was actually well, even if just in this moment, all was well.
So April, I know you want to respond to that, but I also want you to talk about, because see, what I get from you is the same thing I get from Rebecca. When I'm in a room with Rebecca, I feel like anything is possible. And that's just because of the energy and the aura that she brings. I mean, you can tell that she's doing the work, as you said. It's not just one time, continually doing the work. And so her presence in a room is pretty powerful. Even if she's not saying anything, it's just the aura of it all. And I get the same thing from you also. My question, as you answer the previous question, April, is if when you're in spaces where there's lots of toxicity because people are not doing the work, how do you center yourself to not get consumed and start acting out some of the behaviors that you've been exposed to? And how do you stay grounded?
That's a great question. So, yeah, I don't like how you just played me like that. I got to answer the other one and this one. That's all right. I see what you did there, but I see. Okay, it's cool. It's cool. So I'm gonna go back to that first one about wholeness, and I'm gonna ask the question that my meditation teacher asked me. And I had to grab my chain, my pearls. I had to clutch my pearls, but it was around. It was when I was about to get married, and I was like, "Yeah, they ain't no issues here." Yeah, and I said something, and she said, "Who told you that you could ever be rejected?" When she said that, I was like, "Oh my goodness." So I think it's how we've been thinking about this and how we have been conditioned to think that we are not whole. We are in fact whole. So I have to actually push back against my friends, and that's what we do here. But we are in fact whole. But we have to remember our wholeness, especially in a place. So I think it ties really nicely with the next question that you just asked. We have to remember, especially when we are in a place in a society that tells us we are not whole and that we are broken and that we are less than who we are. So when we are in places and spaces that there's lots of toxic energy and all the things. Like your point, you said, you asked, how do we ground ourselves? And we have to remember, we have to take out our tool bag, and we have to, this is what I do. I might have to go outside, literally, and like get some fresh air. I might have to just literally verbally tell myself who I am. I might have to take some deep breaths. This is when the healing practices and the modalities that we learn through InPower Institute comes in handy, such as doing breath work with Amina, such as taking those things that we learn in yoga, such as the natural things that we learn from Amanda from indigenous practices, such as those tools that we learn from Adande in Spirit Rising, or from E. Nicole, who does effective holistic fitness and teaching us how to use our bodies in spaces, even when we can't. That's when we take those tools and use them in real time, when I have to literally take a deep breath and just literally practice using the breath. Power is in the breath. So, because I know we're running out of time, I'm going to pause there.
Mm-hmm. So first of all, let me just say, I got to sit with the whole part that you said, and I heard you, and my heart says that's probably true. But in doing this work, you do see parts of people. I mean, visually, you can see that they aren't whole, that there's some pieces missing. And so I'm trying to, and this is my own work that I'll have to do. I having to reconcile that when I see a person, and even if they're explaining what has happened to them, and you could see that it's affected their wellness and well-being, that I'm trying to help me out.
Can I offer?
I'm trying to move to, like, they are whole, but they need to find these pieces.
Hidden, perhaps disconnected, but still whole. They are detached from, but they are whole. They just can't reach it. You know, sometimes when you suppress stuff, it becomes so dense and so far down that, like, you just reaching down, you can't get to whatever. Try to find something in your purse or in your book bag, and it's it's in there, it's in there, but you just can't feel around. Perhaps detached, distanced from, disconnected from, but still completely whole. It's there. It is absolutely there. They just don't know how to. It's in the dark.
And
Mm.
our job is to remind them that we are stalking the healed future, as Rebecca says. And so we have to hold up the banner of the healed future. So even in times of war, and they got that banner, I never really understood that. But when they have that banner, the reason is because there's hope, because they see the flag or whatever that banner thing is. And if we hold that up, this is what InPower Institute, this is what the Black Healers Collective, all of the things that we have going on, this is what we try to do. We had to hold up that banner so to let people know that we are stalking the healed future and that it's possible, and we're going to do it with you, because we're on this journey too. And it is definitely not a destination, but instead it is a process.
I think that you all have definitely made the case about the journey, about the wholeness, about what's there, even if we don't always see it. And sometimes a person doesn't even see it. In fact, they think that that piece that they're looking for is not even there. It's gone. It's been destroyed by somebody else, or self-destroyed. And so I think when I see the healing part of it, if somebody feels like they need something, is InPower a place where they can call and say, like the suicide hotline, to say, hey, I'm experiencing things, I'm low, I feel like I'm gonna harm somebody, or I've been harming myself. Would they call you all, and then you respond, or are you only responding to sort of the more community based issues when you're invited to do so? Just talk a little bit about how people would access your services and all that wisdom that you all are giving out today.
I'll take Adande, do you want to go on this? I don't know that at this point in time we would have capacity to answer individual calls to that extent. It doesn't mean that if someone reaches out to us that we wouldn't make a referral, or stand with them, be with them in community as they called, support them in that sense. We would definitely do that, but we don't have capacity at this moment to answer those types of individual calls.
So I will say that in the past we have done like individual one-on-one spiritual direction, where that was a service that you could make an appointment to essentially uh, uh, partner with someone in particular to hold space. But again, recognizing that that was not to take the place of therapy, but simply a space to hold space if you need to work something or if you just needed to sit and cry and you don't know who to cry with, kind of thing. However, with the shift, the last 2 years where this world has been simply upside down or in a portal of I have no idea what, we did definitely refocus our energies on community and communal healing spaces where we could tend to larger groups at a time. And so that became integral. I do believe that in the near future, we will have other offerings that individuals of the community can reach out to us and find some spiritual direction.
I'd also like to say we InPower Institute, our community is super large. We have a network of a whole lot of folks, a whole lot of good folks, and we can actually make referrals to folks. So, like, we have an acupuncturist, Efwa Bromley, who's located in Webster Grove. We have a chiropractor. She's located off of
She's
Belmont.
my acupuncturist.
You hear me though, right? Dr. Danielle Peebles, and we have therapists like in our collect. That's the beauty of the collective. We have so many people. And so when people do, and I'm a former director of InPower Institute, so I know a little bit more in the sense that when people do reach out, which they do, they always do. You can check us out at InPowerInstitute.com. When they reach out to us, we will definitely say, hey, you can contact our on-site therapist. Her name is Velma Bell, right? And we can get you her email and her contact information. So people can reach out. We just then will refer them to someone in our network of people that we trust and know is going to hold you. They're going to hold you as a whole. They're going to see your healed future and help you to try to get there. InPower Institute.
So if you are joining us, this is Jamala Rogers, Voices from the Battlefield, and these folks have definitely been on the battlefield trying to save the hearts, minds, and spirits of people. I'm here at the Black Radio Hall of Fame live at Harris Stowe State College. This has been an amazing masterclass, y'all. I have learned a lot. And I think I know a lot about this stuff, but it's always so much more to learn because as human beings, we're not one-dimensional. There are dimensions that we have yet to explore. And so I think the self-work that we must do in order to help our communities and model the behavior that we think, and also let them know we are a work in progress. This is not the perfection. This is progress. And that as both all of you all have said, it's a journey, and we're not going to get there to the very end. And even then, there may be some questions about how we're looking and how whole we are. But I think if the work is there, people see you doing the work. And for me, that's the inspiration of it all. Just looking at people like you all, and people say the same thing about me, but I still say that there's some external stuff, looks of calm that people are looking for right now, and you all seem to have that. And I get it from Bettini, I get it from Rebecca. You just go to your Zen place as soon as you see you all. And so I appreciate you all being here. Again, if you want to contact, I always just put InPower Institute STL and I get you, but www.empowerinstitute, all one word.com. These are some services that you can access to, whether it be your church, your organization, your club, anybody. And we've had folks come out and do things with us, for us. So thank you again for joining us. I want to remind people that in a couple of days, Thanksgiving is coming up, and that means something to Native American people because it is a reminder of the genocide of millions of Native people, the theft of Native lands, and the erasure of Native culture. So I know many Native American people have reclaimed it and renamed it, but it's still a time for us to not get sucked up into the mythology of Thanksgiving. Most people see it as a time to be with family, but I also want folks to reflect on the struggles that's ahead and be thankful for what you have, but what you need to be fighting for. There's also some struggles, labor struggles that are going to be taking place. The Amazon workers are in full, swing here, fighting for a union, fighting for dignity, fighting for rights. And so on November 25th, they're going to have an action in St. Peter's, and you can find out more about that by going to the Missouri Workers Center. So this trauma happens on the job too. I just want folks to know you can be traumatized by your job. So, and it seems like Amazon's doing plenty of that from the stories that we've heard from Amazon workers. So we'll see you next week. We want people to be safe, and we want people to definitely take care of themselves, do some self-care, do some work with other people, and make this community as whole and healthy as it needs to be. Well, something happened to my outgoing music, but we won't worry about it. Thank you, y'all, and have a great day.
Thank you. You too. This was amazing.
Yeah, thank
Thank
you
you.
so much.
Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate it. This I feel oh, you gotta go to another meeting.
No.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, I was encouraged and inspired again by this. Yeah.
Yes.
You all are amazing. If I was in a room with all of y'all together, I don't know what, probably an explosion would happen, or something transformative would have to happen. So yeah, I just see that y'all being in the same room working together and people actually vibing off of y'all could be pretty powerful in and of itself.
Mama
So
Jamala, you asked some amazing questions. So I was like, well, hold on now. Well, let me think.
I know.
You said no, gotcha. And I was like, well, maybe.
No, y'all had it. Y'all did great. No, that was, I think this is probably one of those shows that people like share, because I think it's just so meaningful for our people right now. I know when I think about keep trying to let people know the impact that COVID has had on us, people don't really understand that. But when you're in isolation,
Yes.
and you are fearful, you are full of anxiety about what the day brings, that is not good for the human body and soul. And then for people like me who like to hug, I think Adande, you talked about people like being in physical contact. I would actually ask people, can I hug you? Is it okay to hug you? I got my mask on. I've been vaccinated. I mean, because you just gotta we're humans. We're not like the animals of the world. We gotta have some human contact and human interaction. And when we don't get it, our spirit is depleted.
And we are seeing that. We are seeing that constantly now. We're seeing.
Yeah. So I'm sure I'm going to see y'all again, and and Rebecca get a chance to see how extraordinary you all were and answer these questions. But I didn't expect anything less. Okay, good people. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.